The story begins at the stroke of midnight. A man, thrilled by the moment, celebrated his 30th birthday, convinced that his long-held virginity had finally granted him the power of magic. With excitement, he shouted incantations, summoning fireballs, storms, and ancient forces from the abyss. Yet, despite his loud enthusiasm, nothing happened. Apologizing to his neighbors for the noise, he sighed and admitted that in this world, magic did not exist. Life was only a cycle of work, monotony, and death. With disappointment, he closed his book and prepared for bed. Suddenly, a sharp pain pierced his chest, collapsing him to the floor. Gasping, he realized he was dying. Fear consumed him, and darkness took hold. He later regained consciousness, thinking for a moment that he might be in a hospital. But instead of doctors, a beautiful woman held him, smiling warmly and asking if he was hungry. Shock overcame him as he recognized this familiar tale. He must have died, reincarnated, and started over from birth. Now, as baby Shion, his mind raced. He noticed the room seemed old-fashioned, perhaps a farm from another world. The thought of magical creatures, spirits, and heroes filled him with excitement. This had to be a world of magic. Eager, his mother cradled him, remarking on his quiet nature, unlike his sister Marie. Soon after, Marie rushed in, requesting to hold him. Their mother hesitated for a moment. Shion, in his infant mind, begged her to refuse, fearing Marie might drop him to his death before he could even use magic. Marie protested, insisting she could do it, but their mother finally refused, saying it wasn't the right time yet. Tears filled Marie's eyes as their mother explained that she must wait until Shion could move and speak. Protecting him was everyone's duty, especially hers as the elder sister. Though upset, Marie's heart softened when told she was relied upon as his big sister. With determination, she agreed to be patient. Their mother praised her, smiling. Marie turned to Shion and urged him to grow quickly. In Shion's thoughts, he longed to grow as well, but for now, it was impossible. 2 years passed, and Shion's body finally caught up enough to let him do more. He could now form words, though his tongue still lagged behind his mind. His first spoken word was rice, a desperate wish when there was only bread in their home. From crawling, he learned to stand on 2 feet. At 3 years old, he was allowed to play outside, though their mother warned them not to leave the grounds. Walking the yard, he felt a pang of boredom. It was hard to behave like a child. Thankfully, he could act calm and obedient, but what he wanted most was to use magic. He stopped and had an idea. It might just be possible to use magic at a young age. He wanted to test it out by the tree but hesitated over a spell that wouldn't draw too much attention. Fire could burn the yard, water could flood it. Finally, he thought of something simpler, a windcutter spell. But nothing happened, not even a breeze. His heart sank. Just then, Marie appeared, startling him, and asked what hadn't come out. He stammered, laughing it off, claiming the wind felt nice. Thankfully, it wasn't an adult who caught him, or his 3 years of careful behavior would have been ruined. The embarrassment faded when Marie invited him to run and play. Grateful for the distraction, Shion wondered when he could finally begin studying magic. Shion realized his sister was obsessed with running by the age of 5. It was easy and straightforward to understand her personality. At the finish line, Marie won and teased Shion for being slow, while he gasped for air and protested. He said Marie was just too fast, and Marie explained that she was his big sister after all. They were then momentarily interrupted when their father arrived. Marie ran toward him and welcomed him home, while their father commented that she was as chipper as ever. Marie insisted it was because her hair was the color of the sun, making her shine brightly. Shion joined the conversation and also welcomed his father, and got praised by his father for being as focused as ever. Shion bounced the compliment back at Marie, only to prove to himself how easy Marie was to read. Excusing himself, their father said he needed to fix the carriage. There were many things Shion wanted to learn soon. He now had the ability to move freely and speak to some extent, but to ask about magic right after being born might raise suspicion. So he decided that starting today, he would go little by little in asking questions. For now, however, he had to endure his sister Marie, stretch his patience, and play with her. Night had fallen, and the family was gathered for dinner. Shion began by asking his father what kind of work he did, and his father explained that they were lower-class nobility, meaning they governed the local region. Their mother remarked that Shion might be too young for such a topic, but Shion responded clearly, clarifying to his father if their role was to look after and care for the nearby people. His father praised him once again for being very smart, while Marie, eager to keep up, quickly added that she understood what her father had said as well. Shion then asked his father where he went with the carriage, and his father explained that he helped people in need and purchased and transported crops. The parents glanced at Marie with concern over whether she truly understood, only for her to insist that she did. Shion prodded a little further and asked if there were demons here. Their father, answering with unease, admitted that there were, which was why they should never leave the grounds. Demons were indeed real, terrifying creatures that attacked and harmed people. He warned them that if they ever encountered one, they must not get close. This gave Shion the chance to ask a more important question. Curious, he asked if there was any magic in this world. His father stuttered at the sudden inquiry. Shion clarified, asking if there were fire, water, wind, light, or many kinds of magic, only to be met with disappointment at his father's answer. Apparently, none of what he mentioned existed in this world. Their father explained that he had never even heard the word magic. Though he was well educated, he knew of no such thing that had ever existed in this world. Struck by his father's answer, Shion could only wonder why, in this isekai, no magic existed. Curious, their father began to doubt why, at such a young age, Shion would ask about demons and magic. With unease, he asked where Shion had heard such things and whether an adult had spoken to him when his mother was not around. Defensively, their mother quickly interjected, saying it must have been that time when she warned them it was dangerous outside because of demons, and Shion's young imagination might have turned it into thoughts of magic. She added that children say the strangest things these days, and it could just as easily have come from a dream. Marie began to notice something strange about Shion. His face had turned an odd color, and she wondered if his stomach hurt. Shion told her he was fine, though in truth, he wasn't. Lost in thought, he couldn't help but question why he had been reincarnated here. As Shion grew older, he became determined to learn how to read and write. When speaking, he heard the words in Japanese, but the letters were unfamiliar to him, so he had to memorize them all. Shion also learned more about their family. They were the Ornsteins, with a long history of connected bloodlines and noble lineage. And because his mother and father were of nobility, they taught their children many things. For the time being, Shion resolved to learn everything he could, and that was when it finally dawned on him. There was no such thing as magic in this world after all. The word magic did not even exist here. At the age of 6, Shion lost his purpose in life and with it, all motivation. It left him in a daze, for everything he had hoped for. To be reborn into an isekai, where he could finally wield magic, had been crushed not once, but twice. Marie appeared and pulled him out of his gloomy thoughts. She pointed out how Shion had gotten much faster, but declared that she would strive to run even faster and stronger than him. She challenged him to watch out for it, while Shion, lifelessly, only hoped she would do her best without turning it into a competition. He thought Marie hadn't stopped running since the age of 3, and if she had been born in a different generation, she would likely have been a track and field athlete, but such a thing did not exist in this world. What she was doing, Shion could never understand. The parents couldn't help but notice that Shion had lost his vitality. At dinner, he would only sit quietly, saying nothing. Their father tried to break the silence by asking how they were progressing with their studies. Proudly, Marie announced that she was doing her best at swordsmanship and studying, even praising herself for her efforts. Their father then turned his question toward Shion, who could only lower his head in silence. Their mother quickly tried to lift the mood by praising Shion for being incredibly smart. Despite his young age, he was already beyond the level of middle school students. Their father could only be in awe, remarking that his son was a genius. Competitive as ever, Marie also wanted praise and declared that she, too, was a genius like Shion, only for their father to quickly agree so she wouldn't feel left out. Yet, beyond this cheerful conversation in such a warm family where everyone treated him kindly, Shion couldn't shake the feeling that he did not truly belong with them. He understood their efforts to be careful around him, never pressing him with questions when something seemed wrong. They only encouraged, talked, and protected him from all sides, and even then, all Shion could do was bide his time. To him, it was a pathetic way to live, having experienced more than 30 years and now trapped in the mind and body of a child. He resolved that he could not continue living like this. He should now accept this boring reality from now on. Marie slumped to the ground, gasping that the run had tired her out because she had given it her all. Shion, curious about this for so long, finally took the chance to ask Marie why she ran like that. Marie thought carefully before answering, then explained that she was training for when something might happen, only leaving Shion even more confused, wondering if this still had something to do with her role as his big sister. She went on to explain that she was running with all her might in order to protect Shion. She admitted she might not be very smart, but she was good at physical things, and that was where she chose to hone her strength. Her words struck a chord in Shion. All this time, he had only been thinking about himself. At that very instant, Marie got up and urged Shion to go somewhere with her. She led him beyond their grounds, into an unfamiliar forest, across a riverbank, until they finally reached a cliff overlooking the mountains. Brimming with excitement, Marie told him to wait until nightfall. Shion, uneasy, wondered if their mother would be angry at their absence. Marie admitted she probably would, but insisted she wanted to cheer him up. And then, before their eyes, floating high in the air, were orbs of light illuminating the sky. Marie told him that these balls of light always appeared like this before nightfall, though she didn't know why. Shion asked if their father or anyone else knew about it, and Marie replied that she had spoken of it before, but had never brought anyone to this exact spot. To the others, the topic hadn't seemed mysterious. Curious, Shion asked how it was mysterious, and Marie said she thought it was a word like magic, the same thing he had once spoken about, with light coming out of things. She might have a poor memory, but when it came to Shion, she always remembered. It was because of that time, when Shion had lost all excitement in life, that she decided to bring him to this place she had discovered. She admitted that this was a little dangerous, so she had investigated it first before revealing it to him, which was why it had taken some time. Her words brought Shion to tears. He sobbed an apology, while Marie gently consoled him, saying it was only natural for her to look after him. As Marie beckoned him to head home, Shion held back his tears and thanked her for the experience. She brushed it off, saying she hadn't done it for gratitude, but simply to make him feel better. In truth, Shion did feel better because of it, and that, in turn, warmed Marie's spirits. The next day, both children ate to their heart's content and quickly finished their plates. They thanked their mother, earning her praise for doing a good job. In truth, they were eager to return to the picturesque spot with the bright, floating balls of light. Their mother bid them to come home safely, and the children promised they would. It was at that moment Shion realized he might have given up on life too quickly. Chapter 2. By the time they reached the lake, Shion was exhausted. Catching his breath, Shion was panting heavily. He admitted that running all the way from home had been tough. Marie teased him, saying it was only natural. He never exercised, so of course, he had no strength. Shion admitted it was true. His body wasn't used to physical activity, and he couldn't deny her point. She then wondered what they should do now, since there was still time before nightfall. Shion suggested investigating the mysterious balls of light and where they came from. Marie guessed they must have originated from the lake itself, but Shion reasoned they were likely produced by creatures living within it. He proposed an experiment. They would fetch lake water and fill 3 tubs, one with sand and stones, another with plants, and the last with fish. Marie eagerly volunteered to gather plants, surprising Shion. When he asked what she was doing, she explained that if she didn't take off her clothes, they would only get wet. Panicked, Shion quickly offered to collect the plants himself and told Marie to focus on fishing instead. After Marie prepared the tools, she admitted she wasn't very good at catching fish. When she glanced back, she found Shion smiling. Curious, she asked why, and he said simply that he was happy she was there with him. Marie took it as an insult, retorting that of course she was. She was his big sister, and besides, she wanted to see some magic too. Shion reassured her that if magic did exist, he wanted her to be the first to see it. Marie's face lit up, and he promised. Just then, she felt a tug on the line and shouted excitedly that she had caught something. She pulled up a wriggling fish. Shion asked if it was rare, but she explained it was just a common trout found everywhere. Shion mused that if it was everywhere, then it probably wasn't connected to the lights. They looked at the tubs filled with fish and plants. Nothing glowed. Shion reasoned that they needed to recreate the lake's conditions as closely as possible. He asked if there were more types of fish or animals, and Marie replied that there were plenty, but gathering them all would be difficult. After a pause, Shion declared that the only option left was to dive. Marie protested it might be dangerous, but he insisted it would be fine, though inside he wasn't sure. Marie then offered to dive with him, refusing to let him go alone. He gave in with a smile, agreeing they would go together. As they slipped into the lake, night fell, and the balls of light began to appear. Their numbers grew rapidly, drifting like stars across the surface of the water. Shion reached out and touched one. Warmth spread against his skin, followed by a gentle tickle. Marie nervously asked if it hurt, but he reassured her it felt pleasant. Curious, he wondered what was happening beneath the surface. Together, they dipped their heads under the water. Through the wavering current, Shion observed closely. The glowing orbs weren't fixed in place. They shifted, flickering, as if alive. Marie squinted, trying to see through the dim light, but struggled to make out what was happening. Shion, however, had already realized something. Observing closely, He concluded that the glowing orbs they saw weren't plants as they had first assumed. Instead, the faint lights seemed to be emitted by living creatures that moved gracefully through the water. Wide-eyed, Marie asked how he had figured it out, amazed at his certainty. Shion explained that the lights never stayed in one place, always shifting as though alive, though he still couldn't identify which creature produced them. As they walked home together, Shion turned to Marie and expressed his gratitude for her help that day. Marie smiled softly and reminded him that there was no need for thanks. They were family, after all. Still, Shion insisted, saying he simply wanted to express it. He then mentioned that much of what he'd learned and accomplished was thanks to his older sister's guidance. Reflecting on his words, Shion added that even among family, it was important to say the things that truly mattered. Marie paused for a moment, then smiled in agreement. She admitted that if someone felt that strongly, there was no harm in saying it. With that warm understanding between them, the two continued walking side by side, the golden light of the evening gently wrapping around them. They sat by the lakeside, the evening air settling around them. For Shion, the joy wasn't only from uncovering what might be the source of the mysterious lights, it was also because Marie was there beside him. He cherished these fleeting moments with her. Marie sighed, admitting she hadn't caught any fish that day. Just then, a rustle came from the bushes. A girl emerged, introducing herself dramatically as Rose, a solitary flower blooming in a desolate village. Shion stared in disbelief and wondered if people this full of themselves really existed and if she was of noble birth. Marie cut in bluntly, explaining that Rose was just a regular villager, much to Rose's annoyance. Marie then asked if Rose had come because of the glowing lights. Rose admitted she had, saying she often visited to watch them. Shion was surprised. Marie confirmed that Rose could indeed see the lights, unlike most village children, and even more clearly than she could. Excitement welled in Shion as he pressed Rose for answers on whether they were magic and what created them. Rose, however, confessed she didn't know. She was simply curious as well. Still, she offered to investigate alongside them. Shion considered the idea. Not only could Rose see the lights, but she carried an intellectual presence that might be useful. But then he remembered Marie. She needed validation, too. He asked her if they should let Rose join. If she agreed, he said, then it would be fine by him. Blushing, Marie said it was fine. Shion nodded, declaring that the three of them would investigate together when they had time. He was already looking forward to it. Suddenly, Marie's line tugged. She pulled up a female Etten trout. Shion asked in surprise what made it different. Marie explained that females were rarely caught, as they stayed in the deeper waters. But during spawning season, they swam into the shallows, making them easier to find. Shion muttered spawning season under his breath. A thought stirred in the back of his mind. Determined, he suggested they catch one more male. Marie agreed, and soon pulled up another. They placed it in the tub with the female fish. Rose leaned closer, asking if something would happen. Shion admitted it was only a simple idea. For a while, nothing changed. Marie sighed, saying it didn't seem to work. Shion began to agree, until suddenly, the tub shimmered with glowing orbs. Balls of light rose from the fish, illuminating the dusk. Marie leapt with excitement, completely overjoyed. Rose's eyes widened as she exclaimed that the light was coming from the trout. Shion's chest swelled with happiness. His hunch had been right. He realized that during the trout's courtship rituals, the mysterious balls of light appeared. Marie tilted her head curiously and asked what courting rituals meant. Shion thought to himself that even though she knew about spawning season, she apparently didn't know about courting. Rose stepped in, gently explaining that it was when a male and female, about to marry and form a family, spoke to each other and built their bond. Marie, satisfied with the answer, smiled and declared that she and Shion didn't need courting rituals because they were already family. Shion groaned inwardly. His sister really did blurt out the most reckless things. Marie continued innocently, saying that since she was a girl and he was a boy, eventually she would lay eggs. Shion shouted in shock that humans don't lay eggs, and that siblings couldn't marry. Confused, Marie asked if that meant he didn't love her. The awkwardness made Rose busy herself with the tubs, eager to stay out of it. Flustered, Shion told her of course he did. It was obvious he cared for her. Marie hugged him tightly, relieved, saying that if he loved her too, then everything was fine, because she loved him as well. Shion sighed and clarified that his love was the love between family members. Blood relatives could never marry. Marie stared at him with puzzled eyes and admitted she didn't really understand. After that day, Shion noticed Marie had grown strangely distant. She was shorter with him and quieter. He told himself that given time, she would understand. Rose seemed convinced they would return to normal soon. Even if they fought, She believed that the next time they were together, it would feel as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, Rose asked how their trout were doing. Shion replied there hadn't been any changes, but he had been thinking. He explained to Rose their recent experiments. When his parents touched the mysterious lights, they claimed they couldn't see or feel anything. That meant not everyone could perceive them. If the lights were magic, and if the trout created them as a way to communicate, then perhaps the lights themselves were proof of a magical process. Shion speculated that if people possessed magical power without realizing it, they might be able to unlock it by observing and imitating the trout's courtship behavior. Rose nodded thoughtfully, saying that if they too performed such rituals, perhaps they would discover something new. Shion admitted it sounded simplistic, but agreed it was worth trying. Then Rose paused, studying him closely, and remarked that he had changed. Shion blinked in surprise, asking what she meant. Rose explained that most children would not think so deeply. His intensity, his reasoning, it was more like an adult's. Shion shouted in protest that he was just a child. Rose apologized softly, then smiled faintly. She mentioned courting rituals again, and if he valued them so much, then perhaps she could become his partner instead. Shion froze, stunned, staring at her in disbelief. Chapter 3. Rose looked at Shion intently, her gaze calm, yet filled with quiet determination, and said that was why there should be no problem if he performed some courting ritual with her. After all, she added teasingly, it wasn't as though he could do them with Marie. The words struck him like lightning, leaving Shion frozen in place. For a moment, he could only stare, his thoughts spiraling between confusion and disbelief. Then, as he replayed her words in his mind, he realized she was right. There truly wasn't a problem if it was with Rose. She had always been different, someone who brought out a strange warmth in him. He remembered the time he had jokingly confessed that he liked her, not realizing how serious those feelings might become. Now, standing so close, he could feel his heartbeat quicken. Gathering his courage, he smiled and admitted she was right, asking if she could grant him a favor. Rose hesitated, cheeks turning rosy, before bashfully agreeing. Shion's heart pounded uncontrollably. Nervousness swelled within him, a painful reminder that he had absolutely no experience with women. His palms felt damp, and he could barely steady his breathing as he tried to calm the storm inside. Still, he reminded himself that there was no time to back down. If this strange ritual truly led to unlocking magic, then he had to move forward, no matter how awkward it felt. He drew in a slow breath, preparing himself to take the next step. But before anything could happen, Rose glanced to the side, her expression softening as she remarked that their time was up. The sudden shift caught him off guard, and Shion guessed her father must have been calling for her again. She smiled faintly, promising they would continue their research next time. Shion nodded in agreement, though his mind lingered on her expression. As Rose turned away, he couldn't help but wonder if her cheeks had flushed too. The quiet atmosphere was suddenly shattered when the door burst open with a loud slam. Shion flinched at the sound, his thoughts scattering as Marie came rushing out from inside. Her expression was twisted in distress, her eyes red and glistening. She stumbled forward and collapsed onto the floor, her small frame trembling as sobs tore through her. Shocked, Shion hurried to her side, kneeling beside her as he tried to understand what had happened. Between her choked breaths, Marie managed to speak, explaining that their mother had scolded her, furiously, after she said she wanted to marry Shion. Her words spilled out in fragments, trembling with pain. Their mother had used the same harsh phrases Shion himself once said to her, and the memory pierced him deeply. He froze, realizing how serious she truly was, how much those words must have hurt her. Marie wiped her tears, but couldn't bring herself to meet his eyes. Taking a few shaky steps back, she asked if what she said was really that wrong. All she wanted, she whispered, was to stay with him forever. Shion called out to her softly, his voice trembling as he reached toward her. He told her that he wanted the same thing too, that he wished for them to always be together, just as they were now. He tried to smile, reassuring her that they didn't need to marry for that to happen. To him, their bond as family was already something unbreakable. But Marie only shook her head, her expression clouded with sorrow. Her lips quivered as she spoke, her words quiet yet piercing. If she couldn't marry him, she said, then it meant he could one day marry someone else. And if that happened, everything between them, the closeness, the warmth, the small moments they shared, might disappear forever. The thought terrified her more than anything. Shion froze, unable to find the right words to comfort her. All he could do was look into her tearful eyes, seeing in them a loneliness so deep it made his chest ache. In that moment, he finally understood the weight of her feelings. Shion immediately rushed to Marie's side, his movements instinctive and filled with concern. He gently took her trembling hand, his expression firm yet kind. Looking straight into her tearful eyes, he promised her with all the sincerity he could muster that he wouldn't marry anyone else, that he would stay by her side, no matter what happened. His words were steady, but his heart wavered, torn between affection and unease. Marie lowered her gaze, her voice barely above a whisper as she replied that such a choice would only create problems for their father. He needed heirs to continue the family's bloodline, and if Shion chose not to marry, it would only bring trouble and shame. Shion also added, many families in the region had begun adopting children to raise as heirs because the number of suitable successors had grown scarce. Her words hung in the air, heavy and uncertain. Shion tightened his grip on her hand, realizing that even her sadness came from thinking about their family's future, and not just her own heart. Shion spoke firmly, his voice steady despite the emotion trembling beneath it. He told her that it wasn't just a simple promise or something said to comfort her. It was his true resolve. He meant every word. He truly wanted to stay by her side, no matter what challenges lay ahead. Marie looked up at him, her face still wet with tears, but her expression softening at his sincerity. Her heart ached, yet she could feel how genuine his words were. With a shaky breath, she said that even though they were still just children, his words didn't sound like lies to her. If it came down to it, she would even swear by them. For a brief moment, silence filled the air between them, fragile and full of unspoken warmth. But then her voice broke as she continued, choking on her words. She whispered that promises like these, no matter how heartfelt, could never carry the same weight as marriage vows, and that was what hurt the most. Without thinking, Shion stepped forward and pulled Marie into his arms. His embrace was firm yet gentle, as if trying to shield her from all the pain in the world. He could feel her trembling against him, the sound of her quiet sobs echoing faintly in the stillness. Holding her close, he spoke softly, telling her that she had already done so much for him, more than she probably realized. Every small act of kindness, every moment she stayed by his side, had given him strength when he needed it most. And now, he wanted to do the same for her. That was why, he said, she didn't have to worry anymore. As her little brother, he would be okay because he was there by her side, just as she had always been there for him. Marie's tears fell freely as she buried her face against his shoulder. Her voice broke as she tried to speak, but all that came out were muffled sobs. Instead, she clutched him tightly, holding on as though afraid he might disappear. Then, all of a sudden, Shion felt something strange deep within him, a faint, rhythmic pulse that made his body tense. His breath caught as a soft, warm light began to shimmer across his skin. It wasn't bright, but it was unmistakable, a gentle glow that seemed to hum in sync with his heartbeat. Startled, he looked down at himself, confusion flashing across his face. Marie gasped in alarm, pointing at him with wide eyes. The faint golden aura reflected in her tears as she stammered, asking what was happening to him. Shion tried to answer, but found no words at first. Then, realization struck him. This sensation, this glow, it was magic power. The very energy he thought didn't exist in this world was now coursing through him. But just as suddenly as it had come, the light began to fade, vanishing completely within seconds, leaving only silence. Marie blinked in disbelief, her voice trembling as she compared it to the mysterious orbs of light they had once seen surrounding the trout, wondering aloud why it appeared now and what it truly meant. Shion's thoughts raced for a moment, and then everything seemed to click into place. His breathing steadied as realization dawned in his eyes. He explained to Marie that the glow must have been triggered by the courting ritual, by the surge of emotion that had filled his heart just moments ago. It wasn't random at all. It was the force of his feelings, the intensity of his confession, and the weight of his vow that had awakened the magic within him. The moment he swore to stay by her side and promised never to marry anyone else, something deep inside had responded. Marie blinked in confusion, repeating the words courting ritual under her breath as if testing them, uncertain what he truly meant. Shion met her gaze and nodded firmly, his expression unwavering. Yes, he said, when he declared he would never marry another woman for her sake. That was his greatest confession, his most powerful vow. And somehow, that honest, unshakable emotion had released real magic into the world. Marie's face instantly turned crimson. Her eyes widened as the realization of what Shion had just said sank in, and before he could even react, she let out a startled gasp. Flustered beyond words, she suddenly sprang to her feet, her hands trembling as she tried to compose herself. She spun around, bolted toward the door, and disappeared inside. A loud slam echoed through the hallway as the door shut behind her, leaving a faint silence in its wake. Shion stood frozen where he was, still processing what had just happened. The warmth of the moment evaporated instantly, replaced by a rush of awkward embarrassment. He stood silently for a while, the cool air brushing against his face as he reflected on everything that had happened. The strange light, the emotion, and the fleeting trace of magic. It all lingered vividly in his mind. There truly is magic power in this world. If this world truly lacked magic, then he would be the one to bring it forth. He refused to accept that something so wondrous could not exist simply because no one had seen it before. Somewhere deep inside, he believed the potential had always been there, waiting for someone to awaken it. Shion lifted his gaze toward the horizon, his eyes filled with light, ready to walk forward into the unknown and carve out the future he imagined. Night fell, and later, as he descended the stairs on his way to the bathroom, voices caught his ear. Curious, he stopped and listened from the shadows. His father's voice carried first. He remarked that Marie had spoken very strongly about something earlier. He thought Shion had the wisdom to grasp the situation and had handled it well. His mother disagreed, saying he placed too much confidence in them. After all, they were still children. Father admitted she might be right, but added that Shion's way of thinking was sometimes unusual, even special. Then, in a low voice, he revealed the reason. Shion was not connected to them by blood. Shion froze in place, stunned. His mother quickly dismissed it as irrelevant, saying Shion was still a precious part of their family. Yet the words pierced him deeply. Not being connected by blood, somehow, felt true. He had always felt different from everyone else because of his reincarnation, but he had never once questioned that they were his family. Back in his room, lying in bed, he whispered to himself that it changed nothing. They were still his family, and he would keep it to himself. Complicated matters didn't need stirring. Only later did he realize he had even forgotten about the bathroom. The next morning, Marie caught him staring at her and asked what he was doing. Without hesitation, Shion told her he liked her. Marie's cheeks flushed in surprise, demanding to know why he suddenly said that. Shion explained that every time he confessed, his magic power surged. If he didn't confess, there might not be a reaction. But Marie's expression darkened. Her voice trembled as she asked if she was just a toy to him. Shion suddenly remembered the moment their magic power had been released during the courting rituals, and Marie interrupted, asking if that had all been a lie. Shion shook his head firmly. He insisted it was true, that those were his real feelings. Marie repeated his words softly, asking again if it was the truth, and Shion confirmed. Hearing that, her expression eased, and a faint smile bloomed through her blush as she forgave him. At that moment, Shion found her irresistibly cute. He then speculated aloud that confessions seemed to trigger the release of magic power, but he didn't think it was limited to that alone. Marie tilted her head in confusion and asked what he meant. Shion suggested they try something else, which immediately flustered her. She nervously said she needed to prepare herself if he was going to confess again. Shion replied that he wouldn't do that, and Marie instantly pouted, sulking in disappointment. In his mind, Shion couldn't help but think she was seriously adorable. He speculated that when he had confessed his feelings, he had sensed powerful emotions encompassing him. If those emotions had triggered the release of magic power, then perhaps other emotions could activate it as well. He began to summon exciting emotions and consciously focus his mind on them. Closing his eyes, he drew a deep breath and imagined joy, warmth, and light flooding through his body, letting himself be carried away by the intensity. Suddenly, his body began to glow. Both of them gasped in shock. Marie clapped her hands in delight, exclaiming that he had finally done it. Shion asked if he had really managed to do it on purpose, and she nodded eagerly. He had been shining, even if only for a moment. Shion grinned wider. Still, it was a success. Even if it was only light, it was magic. Shion smiled radiantly. The joy never left him as he declared that he had finally been able to use magic. Marie tilted her head and teased him, saying he was making a crazy face. She had never seen Shion look so delighted before. His entire expression glowed with happiness, and when he said outright that he was happy, she simply smiled and told him she was also glad. In his mind, Shion decided to give a name to what he had discovered. He would call this release of power the magic aura state, the condition of surrounding himself in magic aura. Over the course of the month, he had managed to piece together some important observations. On paper, he wrote his findings. To enter the magic aura state, strong emotions are necessary. There is a limit to how many times it can be used each day. The first time he activated it 5 times in a row, he was so powerless he collapsed into sleep for an entire day. Pushing himself to the very limit of his magic aura slightly increased his total reserves of magic power. The magic aura state had no inherent magical properties. Humans could neither see nor feel it. No matter how much he trained, he could not create the floating balls of light like the trout. Staring at his notes, Shion frowned. What if, even as his total magic power increased, the actual magic he could manifest remained the same? Compared to the trout, it might mean he could only ever produce less. He let out a bitter laugh, thinking it was just a cruel joke. Slamming his hand against the table, he declared that if that were true, then he was nothing more than a human who merely glowed. Still, it was far too early to give up. He recalled how the trout's glow radiated from their bodies, but the balls of light emerged from their heads. He thought, perhaps, if he focused enough energy into a single point, he might be able to reproduce it. He tried to imagine channeling his magic aura into his arm, all while holding on to strong emotions. But the balance was maddening. If he let his focus drift toward emotions, the power scattered. If he shifted his thoughts to his right hand, cold rationality took over, and the emotions faded. He stared at his palm in frustration, then suddenly realized his approach had been wrong. Instead of drawing out magic and forcing it into his hand, he needed to reverse the logic. He decided to think of it this way. If magic gathered in his right hand, he would feel happy. That joy itself would guide the flow. He repeated the thought again and again, focusing all his energy on the feeling of happiness as magic gathered in his right hand. Then, suddenly, his palm began to glow. Shion's eyes widened in astonishment before he burst into laughter. His right hand was shining. Elated, he swung it forward in a playful punch, shouting for the wall to take it, but instantly regretted it when his fist throbbed in pain. Realizing it was only light and that he couldn't destroy anything with it yet, he felt a wave of disappointment. Still, he encouraged himself, reminding that this was progress, another step forward. He jotted it down in his notes again. Moving the magic aura into a single part of the body created a new state. He decided to name it the concentrated magic state. Just then, the door opened, and his mother entered, looking concerned. She said there had been a loud noise and asked if he was all right. Chapter 4. Later that day, the sharp clang of wooden swords rang out from the yard. Shion stepped outside to find Rose and their father sparring. Their swords clashed as their father observed her movements, saying her reflexes weren't bad and that she showed potential to become an all-around swordsman. Rose bowed with gratitude, thanking him earnestly. Marie, watching nearby, cheered happily, remarking that both father and Rose were impressive. Shion, however, only wanted to remain an observer. Today marked his first day joining them in training, but the idea of swordplay had never appealed to him. It was Marie's suggestion that father teach him the basics, though what Shion truly wanted was to continue experimenting with magic power, especially the mystery of producing balls of light like the trout. But now it was his turn. Father called out firmly, telling Shion to come at him with everything he had. He assured him he would hold back. Shion's heart sank. His current body, like his previous one, was hopelessly bad at exercise. In schoolyard games like dodgeball, he had always been the one cowering at the back, dodging until the end rather than facing the ball head-on. Father, seeing him hesitate, advanced. Startled, Shion covered his head with his hands. Father barked at him to block with his sword, but Shion panicked and refused. Instead, he turned tail and ran. Father shouted for him not to run away, while Rose giggled that, if nothing else, he was good at running away. Marie yelled for him to counterattack. Flustered, Shion raised his sword and shouted as he swung, only for the weapon to slip from his hands and clatter down onto his own head. Father rubbed his face with his thumb, exasperated. He admitted Shion had no fencing ability at all. Though his eyes weren't bad and he could dodge decently in his own way, that wasn't enough to make up for his utter lack of coordination. Shion quickly admitted it himself. He had no talent for fencing, and he wanted to stop. There were other things he wished to pursue. His father studied him seriously, gently suggesting that as a boy a little bit of fencing is good. Shion burst out that it was unfair to lump everything into a single category. People had individuality and talent. His was in studying, not swordsmanship. He should focus his efforts there. Father fell silent for a moment, then nodded. His reasoning had merit. He agreed that Shion didn't need to learn fencing, but insisted he would still need to do physical training. Shion accepted with relief. Marie, however, pouted. She wanted him to continue training with Shion. Shion smiled gently and told her that everyone had their place. She was the right person for swordsmanship, while he would find his path elsewhere. So the lesson returned to Marie. Father called her forward again, telling her to show him how much she had grown. Marie nodded seriously and prepared herself. Shion watched in awe as, with a sword in her hands, she seemed to transform into someone else entirely. She charged with all her might, her sword clashing heavily against her father's. The sound of wood locking echoed as Rose and Shion stared in amazement. Shion muttered that her speed was incredible. Father kept his eyes locked on her movements, calmly blocking every strike as she unleashed a flurry of attacks. Then, with a sudden surge of strength, she fainted. She pretended to raise her sword up for a huge blow, then attacked her father's legs. But father moved with startling precision. With the bare minimum of motion, he jumped up and tapped her on the head with his sword. The fight was over. Marie froze, then lowered her blade with a crestfallen look, admitting defeat. Shion whispered in awe at his father's efficiency, while Rose exclaimed how astonishing it was that he could counter Marie's speed so easily. Father told Marie she wasn't bad at all. Her movements were too large, but her attempts to deceive her opponent had been clever. With dedication, she could hone that talent into great skill. Though her face was shadowed by disappointment, Marie nodded seriously. She promised to work hard and grow stronger. Shion ran across the yard, breath ragged, when his father called out, asking what he was doing. Shion answered that he needed to dedicate himself to studying hard. His father only smiled knowingly, reminding him that just earlier, he had admitted the importance of physical training. Shion frowned, confused, and asked what kind of training this was. His father chuckled and gave a simple answer, for him to run. From horseback, father set the pace, calling out encouragement while chasing after him, telling Shion to run 10 laps more. Shion groaned because all he was doing was running. Half a year had passed since he first discovered magic, yet his research had stalled. No matter how much he tried, gathering power in his right hand only allowed him to glow for a brief moment. Once the light left his palm, it fizzled out and vanished. He suspected it was because his magic power was too weak, yet he found it impossible to condense everything fully into his hand. Reproducing the trout's magic was harder than he imagined. One day, as he looked out the window, he saw Marie once again training with her sword, her strikes ringing with determination. She had been growing steadily stronger, chasing her dream of protecting her brother and their family. Shion told himself that he had to become a little brother worth protecting. To do that, he needed something new, a trigger that would trigger his progress. Later, while their father tended to his horse, Shion asked if he was going to Istria. His father confirmed it, and asked if Shion wanted to come along. Surprised, Shion said he usually only went to town with their mother. Father explained that today was special because the villagers are going to purchase things, and several carriages will be there for errands, and would be a perfect opportunity. He repeated the offer. Shion nodded eagerly and accepted. Soon after, the family rode together in a carriage. Marie wondered aloud about Istria, curious about what it might be like. Their father realized it would be her first visit as well. Shion secretly hoped the trip might offer him a clue about magic, perhaps even a grimoire, though he knew it was unlikely. Their mother smiled at the fair weather, and father agreed, saying he wanted them to return before the sun went down. Shion remembered that nighttime was when ferocious demons appeared, and he couldn't help but wonder what those creatures were truly like. When they finally arrived, father pointed ahead, saying they could see the town now. Both Marie and Shion's eyes lit up with excitement as they entered, barely able to sit still while father conducted some business. Soon after, he announced that their purchasing was over, and the next stop was the blacksmith. They arrived at Glass Forge, where a boisterous man greeted them. He addressed their father by name, Gawain. Their father responded seriously, warning him about how he spoke to a valued customer. Marie politely introduced herself as Mary Ann, and Shion followed suit with his own introduction. Glass looked surprised at their manners, joking that he never imagined Gawain's children would be so well-behaved. Father threatened to punch him, and Glass laughed nervously, insisting his fist would hurt too much. Finally, he smiled warmly, introducing himself as Glass, a friend of their father. Holding out a wrapped weapon, Gawain asked if the sword was finished. Glass proudly declared that it was of top quality, crafted specifically for children, small and light. Marie blinked in surprise and asked if it was really for children. Her father then handed it to her, explaining that he had seen her work hard every single day with her training, and this would be her early birthday present. Tears welled in Marie's eyes as she thanked him over and over. Shion clapped and told her she was great. Marie smiled brightly, repeating her thanks, and turned to thank Glass as well. The blacksmith nodded, telling her he had put great care into its forging. It was sturdy enough to cut through almost anything, so she should wield it carefully. He reminded her that there weren't many children her age who had a sword of their own, and that being given one as a gift meant someone had placed great faith in her. With the weapon in her hands, Marie's expression turned serious, silently vowing not to betray that faith. Watching them, Shion thought to himself that Glass must see them not simply as children, but with the same pride one might feel for a niece or nephew stepping into maturity. Glass then turned to Shion and asked if he was next in line. Shion quickly admitted that he had no skill in fencing, so he was focusing his efforts in other areas. Glass nodded, saying parents and children were not the same. Just because a father excelled at something didn't mean the child would. With a warm smile, he explained, there are things a person can do and cannot do, things they want to do and do not want to do. If Shion kept those 4 things in mind, he would surely live a great life. He encouraged them both to do their best. Gawain chuckled, remarking that it was heavy advice from someone who already worked doing what he loved. Glass smirked back, teasing Gawain for having ended up with children anyway. Gawain scowled, warning him not to run his mouth. Glass only laughed, reminding him that when they were young, he had been a prodigal son turned wanderer, dragging Gawain into adventures across the world. During those travels, he had fallen in love at first sight with Emma, which led to him settling down in Istia. Gawain growled, calling him a bastard and wrapping an arm around his neck while raising his fist. Glass choked out a laugh, begging him to stop because the children were watching. Shion smiled quietly to himself. At home, his father was strict and steady, but seeing this side of him with friends, playful, rough, and human, was refreshing. Marie and Shion both laughed, enjoying the sight of the 2 men bantering like boys again. Eventually, Gawain said it was time to return. Glass was welcome to visit them anytime, though he was always buried in work. They bid farewell, and the family climbed back into the carriage. On the road, Shion leaned toward Marie, whispering how amazing the sword was. Marie agreed, though her smile faltered. She admitted it felt unfair that only she received something. Shion reminded her it was her birthday gift, and he was her younger brother anyway. Marie pouted, telling him he should be a little more concerned with himself. Their father turned to Shion, asking if there was anything he wanted. Expensive things were impossible, but perhaps something within reach. Shion shook his head, saying there was nothing he wanted. Their mother leaned in gently, asking if he was sure he wasn't holding back. Shion thought to himself, he truly didn't want anything. Just then, his eyes caught something outside. He pointed quickly, asking what that was. It was a shop with a sign that read Fairy Shop. As the carriage passed, a man and a child walked by, carrying a birdcage. Father glanced at him sharply and told him it was something he didn't need to know about. Shion held his tongue, but kept his gaze fixed. Shion recalls hearing a little about fairies that were thought of close to supernatural beings. His knowledge was limited, but he could at least predict that some people made their living by procuring them. Kidnapping beings shaped like humans and selling them was something society would never fully accept. Shion lowered his gaze and apologized, saying he was only curious for a moment and not to worry about it. He resigned to the idea of just heading home. Their mother agreed, and the carriage rolled onward. Yet in Shion's mind, the sight lingered, the child clutching the cage, and inside, the fragile outline of a small humanoid figure. That image burned itself into his memory, refusing to fade. Chapter 5. Night draped the forest in a heavy cloak of darkness as rain poured relentlessly through the trees. The downpour drowned out even the sounds of insects, leaving only the steady rhythm of water striking leaves and mud. A lone villager trudged along the narrow path, his cloak soaked and his boots sinking into the mire. He grumbled under his breath, cursing the weather and fretting that his firewood would be ruined if he didn't make it home soon. Then, without warning, a rustle tore through the undergrowth nearby. The villager stopped, his breath catching in his throat. From between the shadows, another man stumbled out, a fellow villager, drenched in blood, his eyes wide with sheer terror. Before he could speak, the man collapsed into the mud, gasping for air. The villager rushed forward, uncertain how to approach him, and asked him what had happened. The dying man clutched his shirt and whispered in broken words that his friends had all been slaughtered. With trembling breath, he begged him to warn the Lord. Then he screamed, "Goblins! Goblins were here!" Thunder rumbled above, echoing the dread. Inside the house, Shion concentrated, counting aloud with quiet determination. 8, 9, 10. At last he exhaled, his glowing aura slowly fading into the dim light of the room. He muttered softly to himself that 10 seconds was his current limit, a small step forward, but a clear sign of progress. Marie sat nearby, watching him closely. When the glow vanished completely, she clapped her hands together with a bright smile, praising him warmly for lasting that long while maintaining his magic aura. Shion thanked her with a faint nod, though his expression soon turned serious again. He was now 7 years old. Despite constant training and daily practice, his research into magic had stalled. The strange trout had already taught him everything it could, leaving him with more questions than answers. His thoughts began to wander toward fairies and other magical creatures, being said to exist only in legends, creatures that had never appeared in his previous world. If he could somehow study them, he might finally move forward, but he had yet to get his hands on one. He wondered quietly how he could even begin such a task, and Marie's curious question lingered unanswered in the air. Suddenly, the sound of hurried voices drifted up from downstairs, breaking the quiet rhythm of the evening. Shion and Marie exchanged uneasy glances before stepping out quietly into the hallway, their footsteps light as they tried to listen. The voices grew clearer, men speaking in urgent tones, their words laced with tension and fear. They talked about leaving soon, about how many people in the village could still fight. Their father's familiar voice rose among them, steady but troubled, asking if anyone had weapons ready. Another man replied that they had none to spare, only simple farming tools. Someone else added grimly that all the weapons from the armory had already been distributed to those able to wield them. The mood in the air was heavy, thick with unease. Shion felt his stomach tighten as he realized something serious was unfolding. Without hesitation, he descended the stairs with Marie close behind, the wooden steps creaking beneath their feet. When he reached the bottom, he looked toward the gathered men and asked in a quiet but firm voice what was happening. Their mother explained with a calm but firm voice that magical creatures had appeared in the nearby forest. Though she spoke evenly, there was a faint tremor beneath her composure, the kind that revealed just how grave the situation truly was. Their father and the other men, she continued, were preparing to set out and fight. Marie and Shion's eyes widened in shock at the mention of magical creatures, beings they had only heard about in stories and research notes, never seen in real life. For a moment, the room fell silent except for the muffled patter of rain outside. Marie turned to her brother, trying to smile despite her worry, and reassured him softly that the men would handle everything, and that she would protect him here at home. Their father then stepped forward and issued clear instructions. All women, children, and elders were to remain inside the village while the men destroyed the goblin nest. No one was to leave the house under any circumstance. Emma nodded seriously, her face pale but resolute, firmly affirming her understanding of his command. Their father continued, his voice steady but urgent, saying there were only 2 goblins sighted near the outskirts. It would be enough, he believed, if everyone worked together to deal with them quickly. Yet even as he spoke, Shion's mind reeled at the thought. 2 goblins, just 2. And still, dozens of grown men were needed to band together? The realization struck him like a cold wave. If such creatures required this much preparation, then they were far more dangerous than he had imagined. Unable to contain himself, Shion quickly called out to his father, demanding more details. His tone carried both fear and curiosity, sharpened by instinct. His father paused, meeting his son's gaze for only a moment before apologizing. There was no time for explanations now, he said, but they would speak later. Still unsatisfied, Shion pressed on, analyzing the situation aloud. He questioned whether goblins could only break in from the outside through the 2nd floor, and wondered if they were intelligent or physically strong enough to pose a threat, even to armed men. His father fixed his eyes on him and said they were not. Goblins, he explained, were very dumb creatures, reckless, violent, but lacking any real intelligence. He added that the outer walls of the house were smooth and sturdy enough to prevent them from climbing, which meant they would have to break in through the ground floor. Hearing that, Shion immediately began thinking ahead, his mind racing. He quickly laid out a plan. They would retreat to the 2nd floor and barricade the entrance below with heavy furniture and supplies. If the goblins tried to force their way in, they would fail. For a brief moment, his father's eyes widened, surprised by his son's quick reasoning, before he nodded in agreement. It was, indeed, the best course of action. He then instructed that when the men returned, they would give a loud signal from outside, so those sheltering on the upper floor would know it was safe. Shion responded firmly, promising they wouldn't leave the room until everyone came back. His father gave him a proud but tense look, telling him quietly that he was counting on him. Their mother quickly added that they should also block the windows and doors with sturdy boards to ensure no creature could break through. Her voice was calm, but there was a clear edge of urgency beneath it. She recalled that they still had a set of nails from Glass, the blacksmith who often supplied the village with tools. With that in mind, she mentioned that she had already prepared several boards for emergencies like this, yet somehow, she had misplaced them. The realization made her frown as she tried to remember where she had last seen them. Shion thought for a moment before speaking up, suggesting that the boards might be in the garden shed outside. It was where they usually stored spare materials and equipment, so it made sense. Without hesitation, he offered to go look for them while their mother gathered the nails and tools inside. The decision was quick and practical, each of them moving with tense efficiency as the faint sound of thunder rumbled in the distance, reminding them how little time they had left. In the yard, Before the frightened women and children, Shion barked out orders with calm authority. His voice carried through the rain and tension, steady enough to keep everyone focused. They were to form groups of 3 to carry the boards inside, while those who were frail, elderly, or ill would instead handle lighter tasks like bringing the nails and tools. The air was thick with fear, yet everyone began to move at once, driven by his clear direction. The sound of hurried footsteps and clattering would fill the yard. Suddenly, Rose came running toward them, calling out Shion's and Marie's names as she approached. Without hesitation, she took charge of organizing the effort, instructing others to divide the furniture to block every doorway and window. She requested extra hands to help carry the heavier pieces, her voice composed but commanding. Shion, feeling both relief and admiration, thanked her and told her to continue. Inwardly, he couldn't help but think how invaluable her calm, decisive thinking was in such a moment of chaos. At that moment, Rose turned to the others again, urging them to follow and help. The rain fell relentlessly outside, pounding the earth with a furious rhythm as the storm raged through the night. Wind howled against the walls, carrying with it the faint creaks of trees bending under the downpour. Inside the house, the atmosphere was tense but organized. Every window and door on the first floor had been securely barricaded with thick wooden boards and heavy furniture stacked tightly against them. The once familiar home now resembled a fortress hastily prepared for battle. Shion stood among the others, his expression serious yet composed. He reassured everyone in a firm, confident voice that nothing could possibly break through from below, not even goblins. His calm presence helped the trembling hands of those nearby. Their mother, assessing the barricades one last time, nodded with quiet approval. Then she turned to the group and urged everyone to move to the second floor, explaining that they would be much safer there should the creatures try to force their way in. The group obeyed quickly, climbing the stairs in silence as the storm continued to roar outside. Shion's thoughts raced. He never imagined things would spiral like this, not so quickly, not in a place that once felt so safe. The air was heavy with tension, the sound of rain against the roof blending with the faint tremor of fear spreading through the house. Misfortune had fallen upon them, without warning, just like that day he died in his past life. The memory of that moment flickered sharply in his mind, the helpless confusion, the pain, the cold darkness that followed. The fear of repeating that fate twisted in his chest, growing tighter with every breath he took. It felt as though the past was reaching out to claim him again. But Shion gritted his teeth, forcing himself to steady his heartbeat. More than anything, he didn't want to experience that a second time, not that same crushing helplessness. And beyond that, he couldn't bear the thought of anyone else, Marie, his mother, or the villagers, tasting that same despair. He would not let history repeat itself, no matter what it took. Then it happened. There was a noise outside the fence, faint at first, almost hidden beneath the steady pounding of rain. The squelch of feet sinking into the wet ground echoed through the storm, irregular and heavy, growing closer with every step. A sudden splash followed, sharp and unmistakable. A goblin leapt over the fence, landing in the yard with a wet thud that sent droplets scattering across the muddy earth. Everyone inside froze at the sound. No one dared to breathe. A woman's voice trembled as she whispered, asking what it was, her words barely audible. Another murmured that it sounded like footsteps moving through the rain. The realization spread like wildfire, fear crawling up every spine in the room. Someone tried to calm themselves, suggesting that maybe the men had already returned, but another quickly reminded them that the Lord's signal had not yet been heard. The faint creak of wood and the rhythm of the storm filled the silence until a trembling voice, almost breaking, begged everyone to stay quiet. The splashing grew louder, drawing closer to the house with every uneven step. Shadows shifted just beyond the barricaded windows, flickering in the storm's dim light. From the second-floor window, a dark, hunched outline appeared, its shape unmistakable. The grotesque form of a goblin loomed against the lightning's brief flash, its movements slow but deliberate. Marie's heart pounded, but she didn't hesitate. She seized her sword, her grip firm, her determination burning brightly in her eyes. She declared that she would defeat it. After all, she had trained for this very day, dreaming of the moment she could finally protect those she loved. Rose called out in alarm, her voice breaking through the tension, urging Marie to stop. Their mother cried out next, her tone desperate and afraid, begging her not to do anything reckless. But before panic could spread further, Shion spoke up, trying to steady the room. He told Marie not to worry, insisting once again that the goblin couldn't possibly breach the barricades on the first floor. His voice, though calm, carried the faintest trace of doubt. But then, The sound of claws scraping against wood echoed through the house, sharp and grating, like nails tearing across a door. It started faintly at first, but quickly grew louder, rougher, more frantic. Each scrape seemed to vibrate through the walls, cutting through the rhythm of the rain outside. A heavy thud followed, shaking the barricade slightly, making several people gasp. The noise repeated, uneven and brutal, as though the creature outside was testing the strength of the walls. People whimpered softly, clutching one another in fear, while a few children buried their faces into their mother's arms, struggling to hold back their tears. The air grew tense, thick with dread and silence between each new impact. The scratching grew louder, more erratic, until, all at once, it stopped completely. The stillness that followed was almost unbearable. Every breath in the room seemed to halt. Shion leaned forward slightly, his voice barely more than a whisper, wondering aloud if the creature had finally given up, or if it was simply waiting for another way in. The quiet was suddenly shattered by a blinding crack of lightning that split the sky, followed almost instantly by a deafening boom of thunder and a low rumble that shook the ground beneath them. The entire house trembled violently, as if the storm itself had struck it. Marie darted to the window, her face draining of color as she stared outside. Through the flashes of light, she saw it. A large tree in the garden had been struck by lightning. Its trunk splintered, the massive form creaking as it began to tilt. Before anyone could react, the tree gave way completely, crashing down with an earth-shaking roar. The impact sent dust and debris scattering through the air, followed by a piercing screech that tore through the storm. Everyone clutched their ears as the goblin's shriek cut through the thunder, a sound so sharp it made the walls vibrate. Then came the chilling scrape of claws against the trunk of the fallen tree. Shion's breath caught in his throat as realization struck with horror. The goblin was climbing in through the fallen tree. The door shuddered violently, each impact echoing through the wooden walls like a drum of doom. A heavy container that had been set against it toppled over with a loud crash, scattering its contents across the floor. The sudden noise made the children scream, their voices rising above the thunder outside. Then came another pounding, louder, faster, more vicious than before. The repeated thumps shook the entire frame, dust falling from the ceiling with every blow. It was as though the creature outside was hammering its fury into the wood itself. The sound intensified until, with a sharp crack, the door splintered. A hole burst open, shards of timber flying inward. Through it, a grotesque, gray-green hand forced its way inside, fingers crooked and twitching as claws scraped against the floorboards. A single, bloodshot eye appeared next, peering through the jagged gap. Its gaze darted wildly across the terrified room before fixing on its prey. Then, slowly, a twisted grin stretched across the goblin's face, ugly, triumphant, and hungry, as it realized it had finally gained entry. The group cowered in horror as the creature laughed, its guttural sound echoing through the room like something torn from a nightmare. The harsh, rasping noise bounced off the walls, filling every corner with dread. Some covered their ears, others clung to one another, trembling. The air was thick with fear and the scent of damp wood and smoke. Shion's heart sank as he stared at the monstrous figure before them. There was no way to fight it, no weapon strong enough, no strength among them to resist. It would definitely kill them all. The realization struck him like a knife to the chest, cutting through every ounce of courage he had tried to hold on to. He cursed himself silently, bitterly, for ever wishing to study such a creature, for letting curiosity lead them into this nightmare. Closing his eyes, he felt despair wash over him like cold water. It was hopeless. The walls, the storm, the darkness, all of it pressed in at once. There was no escape. But then, Marie stepped forward, raising her sword with trembling hands. The faint light of the storm flickered across the blade, reflecting in her determined eyes. She declared she would fight, her voice unsteady yet filled with conviction. The goblin suddenly stopped moving, its cruel, twisted gaze locking onto her. For a heartbeat, the room fell silent except for the rain and the distant rumble of thunder. Marie froze, her breath caught in her throat as the creature's grin deepened. She swung her sword with all the strength she could muster, but the blade met only the wall, sending a sharp clang through the air. The force of the impact made her grip falter, the weapon slipping from her hands. That single moment of weakness was all it needed. With a guttural snarl, the goblin lunged forward, its movement swift and brutal. Its clawed hand seized her ankle and, with terrifying strength, hurled her to the floor. The thud echoed through the room as fear swallowed every voice. Shion cried out to Marie in desperation, his voice cracking with panic as the goblin raised its claws for another strike. Before the monster could land the blow, their mother moved, her body acting on pure instinct. She leapt in front of her daughter, shielding Marie with her own body just as the creature's attack came crashing down with deadly precision. The impact echoed through the room, followed by the sharp gasp that escaped her lips. Blood spilled freely down her back, staining the floor beneath her. Even through the pain, she turned her head slightly, her trembling voice managing to ask if Marie was hurt. Marie, wide-eyed and shaking, choked out that she was fine, her voice breaking with tears. A faint look of relief flickered across their mother's face, soft and fleeting, like a final smile. She whispered weakly that as long as Marie was safe, that was enough. Her strength faded, her body going limp as she collapsed into her daughter's arms. Marie clung to her tightly, trembling as realization struck, the cruel truth that her mother's life was slipping away. Shion's eyes went wide with fury. His chest burned. He thought desperately that this was not okay. He could never allow this. Not when the ones he cared for would be killed, not when Marie and mother were both in danger. His heart pounded violently, each beat echoing in his ears like a roar. He could never allow this. Not this cruelty, not this senseless loss. Not when the people he cared for most were being torn away right in front of him. Every fiber of his being screamed in defiance, demanding he do something, anything, to stop it. In that moment, Shion seized its arm with his own, gripping it tightly as if to curse the creature itself, vowing in his heart that it would never get the best of them. The goblin snarled and twisted, but Shion held on, his body trembling from both rage and fear. He shouted with every ounce of strength left in him that he would never accept a fate like this. His voice cracked, echoing through the trembling walls, defying both the monster before him and the cruel destiny that sought to repeat itself. Even though he had no plan, no power, even though he had failed until now, he refused to yield. His vision blurred, his heart pounded, and for a split second, the world seemed to slow around him. Then he saw it. Something faint, something impossible. A pale light shimmered within the goblin's body, glowing from deep inside its flesh. The glow pulsed like a heartbeat, soft but steady, and Shion's eyes widened as realization began to dawn. Something within him, and within the creature, had begun to awaken. He calmed himself, focusing sharply. He didn't understand the exact trigger, but he was certain it was all connected. Everything he had practiced, everything he had cultivated, surged together at once. The nature and response of magic power, and the answer that had guided him to this point, was this, that those with magic power would react to magic power. As he realized this, his hand began to glow, and with a powerful thrust, he pressed it against the goblin's face.